to try to get the health care that their doctors say that they and their children need.
Damn, internet.
Medicare for All solves that problem. And I understand there are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it. Well, health care is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
Congressman O'Rourke, when you ran for Senate, you also praised a bill that would replace private insurance. This year, you're saying you're no longer sure. Can you explain why?
My goal is to ensure that every American is well enough to live to their full potential because they have health care. In Laredo, Texas, I met a young man, 27 years old, told me that he'd been to a doctor once in his life. And on that visit, he was told he had diabetes, he was told he had glaucoma, and he was told untreated because he doesn't have health care, he'll be dead before the age of 40. So getting to guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care as quickly and surely as possible has to be our goal. The ability to afford your prescriptions and go to a primary care provider. The ability to see a mental health care provider. In Texas, the single largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system today. And healthcare also has to mean that every woman can make her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care that makes that possible. Our plan says that if you're uninsured, we enroll you in Medicare. If you're insufficiently insured, you can't afford your premiums, we enroll you in Medicare. But if you're a member of a union that negotiated for a health care plan that you like because it works for you and your family, you're able to keep it. We preserve choice.
All right, I need you to shut up because you be talking way too much.
Ask a follow-up on this one. Just to be very clear, I'll give you 10 seconds. Would you replace private insurance?
No, I think that choice is fundamental to. The choice is fundamental to our ability to get everybody cared for.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles,
yo, you're from New York. Your state is trash. Nobody wants to hear that shit. Until y'all get your shit together, don't tell everybody else how to do it.
You got to start by acknowledging the system is not working for people.
They're able to keep them.
Why are you defending private insurance?
Say they like their private health insurance, by the way. It should be noted that 100 million Americans, I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken.
I don't even know who this guy is.
Doesn't that make sense?
But
we
no,
should give everyone in this
to him.
country health care as a basic human right for free. Full stop. But we should also give them the option to buy private insurance. Why do we have to stand for taking away something from people? And also, it's bad policy. If you go to every hospital in this country and you ask them one question, which is how would it have been for you last year if every one of your bills were paid at the Medicare rate? Every single hospital administrator said they would close. And the Medicare for All bill requires payments to stay at current Medicare rates. So to some extent, we're basically supporting a bill that will have every hospital close. My dad was a union electrician. Right, I actually grew up in a working-class family. He loved the health care that the IBEW gave him. And I just always think about my dad and anything I would do from a policy perspective. He'd look at me and he'd say, good job, John, for getting health care for every American. But why are you taking my health care away?
I've let this play out a little bit because I'm fascinated to hear the daylight between you. Congresswoman Gabbard, weigh in here.
I think we're talking about this in the wrong way. You're talking about one bill over another bill. Really what we're talking about is our objective, making sure that every single sick American in this country is able to get the health care that they need. I believe Medicare for All is the way to do that. I also think that employers will recognize how much money will be saved by supporting a Medicare for All program, a program that will reduce the administrative costs, reduce the bureaucratic costs, and make sure that everyone gets that quality health care that they need. I also think if you look at other countries in the world who have universal health care, every one of them has some form of a role of private insurance. I think that's what we've got to look at, taking the best of these ideas, but making sure unequivocally that no sick American goes without getting the care that they need, regardless of how much or little money they have in their pocket.
Congresswoman, thanks. Let me turn to Senator Booker on this. Senator Booker, explain to me where you are. This is hugely important to people. So tell us where you are.
I absolutely will. First of all, we're talking about this as a healthcare issue, but in communities like mine, low-income communities like mine, it's an education issue because kids who don't have healthcare are not going to succeed in school. It is an issue for jobs and employment because people that do not have good healthcare do not succeed at work. It's even a retirement issue because in my community, African Americans have a lower life expectancy.
Don't act
because
like
of
you're
poor
the
healthcare.
African American
And so where I
community.
stand is very clear.
I hate you.
Healthcare is not just a human right, it should be an American right. And I believe the best way to get there is Medicare for all. But I have an urgency about this.
You don't speak for me, son.
President of the United States, I'm not going to wait. We have to do the things immediately that are going to provide better care. And on this debate, I'm sorry. There are too many people profiteering off of the pain of people in America, from pharmaceutical companies to insurers. Literally, the overhead for insurers that they charge is 15%, while Medicare's overhead is only at 2%. We can do this better, and every single day I will be fighting to give people more access and more affordable costs until we get to my goal, which is every American having health care.
Time is up, Senator. I want to move back, if I can, to Congressman Gabbard.
I love when they yell at each
Insurance
other.
companies last year alone sucked $23 billion in profits out of the healthcare system.
So civil they are.
$23 billion, and that doesn't count the money that was paid to executives, the money that was spent lobbying Washington. We have a giant industry that wants our healthcare system to stay the way it is, because it's not working for families, but it sure as heck working for them.
Governor Inslee.
It's time for us
Inslee.
to make families come first.
It should not be an option in the United States of America for any insurance company to deny women coverage for their exercise of their right of choice. And I am the only candidate
Here we go with this.
who has passed a law protecting a woman's right of reproductive health and health insurance. And I'm the only candidate who has passed a public option. And I respect everybody's goals and plans here. But we do have one candidate that's actually advanced the ball. And we got to have access for everyone. I've done it as a public option.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to get you. I'm fascinated by this, Senator Klobuchar.
I just want to say there's 3 women up here that have fought pretty hard for a woman's right to choose. So I'll start with that. And then I just want to make very
Start the
clear,
identity
I
politics.
share the
Here we
goal
go.
of universal health care. And the idea I put out there, the public option, which the governor was just talking
Sex shouldn't
about,
have nothing to do
is that you use Medicare
with
or
your
Medicaid without
your
any
political
insurance companies
stance.
involved. You could do it either way. And the estimates are 13 million people would see a reduction in their premiums. 12 more million people would get covered. So I think it is a beginning, and the way you start and the way you move to universal health care.
Secretary Castro, this one is for you. All of you on stage support a woman's
all
right
lip
to an
service.
abortion.
They
You
know
all
they're not
support
gonna
some
do it.
version of a government health care option.
Who's gonna vote for
Would
it?
your plan cover abortion?
It sounds
Mr.
good. It would be awesome.
I don't
but
believe only in
you and none of your
reproductive,
people are going to vote for that.
freedom. I believe in reproductive justice. And what that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female.
Well, here we go. Identity politics 101.
Doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose. And so I absolutely would cover the right to have an abortion. More than that,
Wow.
everybody in this crowd and
So now
watching
trans
at home
people
knows
have
that in our
abortions.
country today, a person's
You
right
get
to
an
choose
abortion.
is under
You get
assault
abortion.
in places like
You
Missouri,
get an
in
abortion.
Alabama, in Georgia. I would appoint judges to the federal bench that understand the precedent of Roe v. Wade and will respect it. And in addition to that, make sure that we fight hard as we transition our healthcare system to one where everybody can get and exercise that right.
Senator Warren, would you put limits on any limits on abortion?
I would make certain that every woman has access to the full range of reproductive health care services, and that includes birth control, it includes abortion, it includes everything for a woman.
Yeah, women should have health care,
And on that,
but
it's not enough
we're not
for us
killing
to
babies.
expect the courts to protect us. 47 years ago, Roe versus Wade was decided, and we've all looked to the courts all that time as state after state has undermined Roe, has put in exceptions, has come right up to the edge of taking away protection.
Your time is up, Senator.
We now have an America where most people support Roe versus Wade. We need to make that
Senator
federal
Gerber,
law.
thank you. Jose?
Thank you.
Senator Booker, I want to kind of come back on a discussion we were having about health and the opioid crisis. You represent a state where 14 of the 20 largest pharmaceutical companies are based. Should pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these drugs be held criminally liable for what they do?
They should absolutely be held criminally liable because
I
they
agree.
are liable
I can
and
agree with that.
responsible. This is one of the reasons why, well before I was running for president, I said I would
But
not take
you
contributions
dishonest
from pharma
senators
companies, not
aren't
take
going to vote for it.
contributions, from corporate PACs or pharma executives.
They're killing people,
because they are part
but
of
you
this
making
problem.
money off of it.
And this opioid addiction in our country, we in cities like mine have been seeing how we've tried to arrest our way out of addiction for too long. It is time that we have
But it's a white issue now. That's why y'all care.
And make
Black people been getting screwed over by drugs for years.
of our land and make the pharmaceutical companies that are responsible.
Lock them up for 25 years for first offense.
How would you deal with it?
Tonight in this country, you have 2.3 million of our fellow Americans behind bars. It's the largest prison population on the face of the planet. Many are there for nonviolent drug crimes, including possession of marijuana, at a time that more than half the states have legalized it or decriminalized it. And yet, despite what Purdue Pharma has done, their connection to the opioid crisis and the overdose deaths that we're seeing throughout this country, they've been able to act with complete impunity and pay no consequences.
Because there's money in it now. Fuck the black people. Now there's money. Everybody can get some.
In my administration, we will hold them to account. We will make sure that they pay a price, and we will help those who've been victims of this malfeasance in this country, get them treatment and long-term care.
I know immigration is on a lot of your minds here, and I want to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in a moment. We need to take a break. We'll be back with more from Miami after this.
Word? There's a break? Shit. Go get me another beer. That's big facts, though. But it's funny, he didn't do all that
Good evening, everyone. Breaking
Espanol talk on that second round, though.
Reporting from here on the ground, we begin tonight with
In the story.
It sounds like a jet airplane up there, but that is fire.
Asking the questions you would ask.
What's it like flying into the hurricane zones?
Never seen anything like it.
Giving the context you need.
Let's talk about the MAX. How do you convince a skittish passenger to get on this airplane?
Lester Holt.
He's met a lot of great people doing a lot of great things in their
the
community.
most trusted TV news anchor in America.
That's Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt.
A very busy news day.
Today's high-stakes confrontation.
Let's go live to the border where our colleague... Exclusive video.
The country's top intelligence officials testifying.
NBC News gets an exclusive look inside.
Live here at the nation's capital.
There's now an open investigation.
Blockbuster new reporting today on
This is the deadliest school shooting.
The Supreme Court upheld the revised version.
Well, this new report comes amid a staggering amount of news.
Breaking news tonight exclusively here
NBC News was first out with this scoop today.
It's been an extraordinary night watching this develop. So, a lot to talk about.
Tomorrow, the first real test of the 2020 presidential race continues with night 2 of the Democratic candidates debate. Biden, Sanders, Buttigieg, and Harris battle it out with 6 others. Who will make the most of the moment? The first Democratic debate, moderated by Lester Holt, Savannah Guthrie, Jose Diaz-Balart, Chuck Todd, and Rachel Maddow. Tomorrow at 9 Eastern on NBC, MSNBC, and Telemundo.
Turn to an issue that has been in the news, especially this week. There are undocumented children being held alone in detention, even as close as Homestead, Florida, right here, less than 30 miles from where we are tonight. Fathers and mothers and children are dying while trying to enter the United States of America. We saw that image today that broke our hearts, and they had names. Oscar Martinez and his 23-month-old daughter Valeria died trying to cross the river to ask for asylum in this country. Last month, more than 130,000 migrants were apprehended at the southern border. Secretary Castro, if you were president today, hoy, what would you specifically do?
Thank you very much, Jose. I'm very proud that in April I became the first candidate to put forward a comprehensive immigration plan. And we saw those images. Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. it should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river. They have been playing games with people who are coming and trying to seek asylum at our ports of entry. Oscar and Valeria went to a port of entry, and then they were denied the ability to make an asylum claim. So they got frustrated, and they tried to cross the river, and they died because of that.
On day one, sorry.
On day one, I would do that executive order that would address metering, and then I would follow that up in my first 100 days with immigration reform that would honor asylum claims, that would put undocumented immigrants, as long as they haven't committed a serious crime, on a pathway to citizenship, and that would go to the root cause of the issue, which is we need a Marshall Plan for Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, so that people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of coming to the United States to seek it.
Senator Booker, what would you do on day one? And this is a situation that the next president will inherit.
La situación ahora es inaceptable. Este presidente ha atacado, ha demonizado los inmigrantes. Es inaceptable. Voy a cambiar este. On day one, I will make sure that, number one, we end the ICE policies and the customs and border policies that are violating the human rights. When people come to this country, they do not leave their human rights at the border. Number two, I will make sure that we reinstate DACA, that we reinstate pathways to citizenship for DACA recipients, and to make sure that people that are here on temporary protected status can stay and remain here. And then finally, we need to make sure that we address the issues that made Oscar and Valeria come in the first place by making major investments in the Northern Triangle, not like this president is doing, by ripping away the resources we need to actually solve this problem. We cannot surrender our values and think that we're going to get border security. We actually will lose security and our values. We must fight for both.
Jose, if I might, very briefly, and this is an important point, my plan, and I'm glad to see that Senator Booker, Senator Warren, and Governor Inslee agree with me on this. My plan also includes getting rid of Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, to go back to the way we used to treat this when somebody comes across the border, not to criminalize desperation, to treat that as a civil violation. And here's why it's important. We see all of this horrendous family separation. They use that law, Section 1325, to justify under the law separating little children from their families.
Jose,
and so I want to challenge every single candidate on this stage to support the repeal of Section 1325.
30 seconds.
As my friend here said, I agree with him on that issue, but folks should understand that the separation of children from families doesn't just go on at our border. It happens in our communities as ICE are ripping away parents from their American children, spouses and the like, and are creating fear in cities all across this country where parents are afraid to even drop their kids off to school or go to work. We must end those policies as well.
Discussion about immigration in this country, because look at the bottom line here. That tragic photo of that parent, that child, and I'm saying this as a father. Every American should feel that in their heart, and every American should say that is not America. Those are not our values, but we have to get under the skin of why we have this crisis in our system, because we're not being honest about the division that's been fomented in this country. The way that American citizens have been told that immigrants somehow created their misery and their pain and their challenges. For all the American citizens out there who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you, the immigrants didn't do that to you. The big corporations did that to you. The 1% did that to you. We need to be the party of working people, and that includes a party of immigrants. But first, we have to tell working people in America who are hurting that we're going to be on their side every single time against those big corporations who created this mess to begin with. And remind people we're all in this together. If we don't change that debate, that politics that's holding us back, we won't get all these reforms people are talking about. That's what we need to do as Democrats.
Congresista, if I could, I'm sorry. Congresista O'Rourke, ¿qué haría usted en el primer día, si usted es presidente, sobre esta realidad que está ocurriendo? What would you do, Congressman, day one at the White House?
Vamos a tratar cada persona con el respeto y dignidad que merecen como humanos. We would not turn back Valeria and her father, Oscar. We would accept them into this country and follow our own asylum laws. We would not build walls. We would not put kids in cages. In fact, we would spare no expense to reunite the families that have been separated already. And we would not criminally prosecute any family who is fleeing violence and persecution. We would make sure...
Secretary, let him finish, and I will give you his policy. But let him finish. Let him finish, please. Yes.
We would not detain any family fleeing violence, in fact, fleeing the deadliest countries on the face of the planet today. We would implement a family case management program so they could be cared for in the community at a fraction of the cost. And then we would rewrite our immigration laws in our own image. Free dreamers forever from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country. Invest in solutions in Central America, work with regional stakeholders so there's no reason to make that 2,000-mile journey to this country.
Secretary, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them.
All right,
Some
I'm back.
of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Bethel. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you
Pandering
truly
at
want
its
to change the
finest.
system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
What about all the black people that are living in ghettos across this country that don't have anything?
Folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants.
What about
and
Skid
you
Row?
said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325
Y'all worried about people ain't even
was
here.
because, you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking.
Ain't nobody even
But let
talking
me tell
about
you
America
what,
right now.
Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Title 21, and Title
Fucking
22
Democrats,
already
man.
cover
If
human
we
trafficking and drug
apprehend a known
trafficking.
smuggler
I
or
think
drug
that you should do your
trafficker,
homework
we're going
on
to
this
make
issue.
sure that they are
If you
deported
did your
and criminally
homework on this
prosecuted.
issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
This is an issue that we should and
Warren looked lost as shit.
for a long time, and we will for a long time.
Can we talk about the conditions to why people are coming here?
Let's let Lester.
Because
Savannah, Savannah. I know it's just we could go on.
But rather than talk about specific provisions, we really have to talk about why these people are coming to
You'll
our
get your
country
chance.
and what are we going to do to actually make a difference in these countries.
Congressman, you'll get your chance. Let's continue the discussion. Senator,
Where's the chat? Let me see y'all. Let me see y'all in the chat. What you got to say?
Just said. He wants to no longer have it be a crime to illegally cross the border. Do you support that? Do you think it should be a civil offense only? And if so, do you worry about potentially incentivizing people to come here?
Immigrants, they do not diminish America. They are America. And I am happy to look at his proposal, but I do think you want to make sure that you have provisions in place that allow you to go after traffickers and allow you to go after people who are violating the law. What I really think we need to step back and talk about is the economic imperative here. And that is that 70 of our Fortune 500 companies are headed up by people that came from other countries. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. We have a situation right now where we need workers
But they came in legally.
factories. We need them to start small businesses. We need their ideas. And this president
We got plenty of ideas in the ghetto.
at a time
Go
when
there.
our
Start
economy
there in the
needs
hood.
immigrants. And so my proposal is to look at that 2013 bill that
What
passed
about
the
my
Senate
kids?
with Republican support, to upgrade that bill, to make it as good as possible and get it done. It brings the debt down by $158 billion. It gives a path to citizenship for people who can become citizens. And it would be so much better for our economy in America.
That's time. Thank you. Congressman Ryan, same question. Should it be a crime to illegally cross the border, or should it be a civil offense only?
Well, I agree with Secretary Castro. I think there are other provisions in the law
that will allow you to prosecute people for coming over here if they're dealing in drugs and other things. That's already established in the law. So there's no need to repeat it. And I think it's abhorrent. We're talking about this father who got killed with his daughter. And the issues here, the way these kids are being treated, if you go to Guantanamo Bay, there are terrorists that are held that get better health care than those kids that have tried to cross the border in the United States. That needs to stop. And I think the president should immediately ask
like somebody
doctors
who's
and
never been
nurses to go immediately down to the border and start taking care of these kids. What kind of country are we running here where we have a president of the United States who's so focused on hate and fear and division?
Here
and
we
what
go.
Has happened now, the end
Buzzwords.
result is now we've got kids literally laying in their own
You
snot
ain't
with
said
3-week-old diapers that haven't been changed. We've got to tell this president that is not a sign of strength, Mr. President. That is a sign of weakness.
Senator Booker, I'll go to you. But no, a lot of people, Jose asked the question, if you're president on day one, what will you do with the fact that you will have families here? There's been a lot of talk about what you'll do in the first 100 days, about legislation. What will you actually do with these families? How will you care for them? Will they be detained or will they not be?
Well, this is a related and brief point, because what we're talking about, what Secretary Castro and I are talking about, is that we have the power to better deal with this problem through the civil process than the criminal process. I have been to some of the largest private prisons, which are repugnant to me, that people are profiting off of incarceration and their immigration lockups. Our country has made so many mistakes by criminalizing things, whether it's immigration, whether it's mental illness, whether it's addiction. We know that this is not the way to deal with problems. There is a humane way that affirms human rights and human dignity and actually solve this problem. Donald Trump isn't solving this problem. We've seen under his leadership a surge at our border. We solve this problem by making investments in the Northern Triangle to stop the reasons why people are being driven here in the first place. And we make sure we use our resources to provide health care, to affirm the values and human dignity of the people that come here, because we cannot sacrifice our values, our ideals as a nation for border
we can
security.
sacrifice low-earning Americans so we can import immigrants that can take the jobs from the low-earning Americans who need that low pay to subsidize their welfare.
There's no reason for the detention and separation of these children.
Welfare is a good thing.
Pending their hearings,
hate me or
and
not.
they should have a hearing and the law should
Some
be
people
followed.
need it.
That's what should happen. And we should do what we're doing in Washington State. I'm proud that we've passed a law that prevents local law enforcement from being turned into mini ICE agents. I'm proud to have been the first governor to stand up against Donald Trump's heinous Muslim ban. I'm proud to be a person who's not only talked about Dreamers, but being one of the first to make sure that they get a college education so that they can realize their dreams. These are some of the most inspirational people in our state. And I'll leave you with
But
this
Trump
thought
hasn't
before I
even
go
reached
without saying.
Obama levels of
Donald Trump
deportation
the
yet.
other day tried to threaten me. He thought it was a threat to tell me that he would send refugees in Washington State if we passed a law.
He
that I
should
passed.
have.
And I told him that's not a threat at all. We welcome refugees.
That would have been a
into our
guaranteed
state.
vote for
we
me.
recognize diversity as a strength. This is how we've built America. That tradition is going to continue if I'm president of the United States.
We're going to switch to another topic now. We've got a lot to get through. Let's talk.
My
We need to talk
grandfather
about.
was actually separated from his family when he came to this country.
We're going to talk about Iran right now because we're working against the clock. Tankers have been attacked. A U.S. drone has been shot down. There have been disturbing threats issued by both the U.S. and Iranian leadership. I'd like, if you can, just for a moment, to put aside how you think we may have gotten here. But what I want to know is, how do you dial it back? So a show of hands, who as president would sign on to the 2015 nuclear deal as it was originally negotiated?
At least one of you is honest.
May I address that?
At least one of you
First
is
and
honest.
foremost, it was a mistake to pull out of that deal. And one of the reasons why we're seeing this hostility now is because Donald Trump is marching us to a far more dangerous situation. Literally, he took us out of a deal that gave us transparency into their nuclear program and pushed back a nuclear breakout 10, 20 years. And now we see Iran threatening to go further, and we're being pulled in further and further into this crisis.
Yes, it is all platitudes.
We need to renegotiate and get back into a deal, but I'm not going to have a primary platform to say unilaterally I'm going to rejoin that deal, because when I'm President of the United States, I'm going to do the best I can to secure this country and that region and make sure that if I have an opportunity to leverage a better deal, I'm going to do it.
I rule with John Smith.
Because you said you would negotiate yourself back into the Iranian agreement. Can you argue that that nuclear pact, as it was ratified, was a good deal?
Yes, it was.
It was imperfect, but it was a good deal for that moment.
It was so a good deal when they gave billions of dollars to him in a plane in the middle of the night.
To get back in the deal. But the point is, Donald Trump told us when he got out of it that he was going to give us a better deal. Those were his words. And now we are a month away from the Iranians, who claim now that they're going to blow the caps on enriching uranium. And the Iranians have told us this. And so that's where we are right now. He has made us less safe than we were when he became president. So what I would do is negotiate us back into that agreement, is stand with our allies and not give unlimited leverage to China and Russia, which is what he has done. And then, finally, I would make sure that if there is any possibility of a conflict, and we're having this debate in Congress right now, that he comes to Congress for an authorization of military force. I would do that. And this president is literally every single day 10 minutes away from going to war, one tweet away from going to war, and I don't think we should conduct foreign policy.
He is not going to go to war. He's doing everything he can to not go to war because he doesn't want that on his resume.
Sign back onto the 2015 deal.
Be honest.
Would you insist, though, that it address Iran's support for Hezbollah?
Let's deal with the situation where we are, where this president and his chicken hawk cabinet have led us to the brink of war with Iran.
Yeah.
I served in the war in Iraq at the height of the war in 2005, a war that took over 4,000 of my brothers and sisters in uniforms lives. The American people need to understand that
I ain't seen you in the battlefield.
Iran would be far more devastating, far more costly than anything that we ever saw in Iraq. It would take many more lives. It would exacerbate the refugee crisis. And it wouldn't be just contained within Iran. This would turn into a regional war. This is why it's so important that every one of us, every single American, stand up and say, no war with Iran. We need to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement, and we need to negotiate how we can improve it. It was an imperfect deal. There are issues like their missile development that needs to be addressed. We can do both simultaneously to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and preventing us from going to war.
So kiss their ass, basically, and hope they don't go to war with us. Got it.
Obviously, if there was an attack against the American, our troops, then there would have to be a response. But my point
wait till we die first.
I got it. This is Donald Trump and his cabinet, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and others, are creating a situation that just a spark would light off a war with Iran, which is incredibly dangerous. That's why we need to de-escalate tensions. Trump needs to get back into the Iran nuclear deal and swallow his pride. Put the American people first.
Hey, but wait a minute.
All right, we are out of time, and we're up against a hard break, but we will have much more. Mayor de Blasio will have more. The commercial is coming. We will continue our questioning next with Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow. Stick around. We'll have a lot more with some very anxious candidates.
I feel like talking shit. I'm going to mute this real quick. So far, we've heard you got to give everything away for free. College should be free. Although, don't get me twisted, I do think that college should be a little bit cheaper. But you know what? There could be stipulations on such a thing. Like me, I use some military stuff to pay for my college. Just finished my bachelor's degree. And I know that not everybody qualifies for the military. So guess what? How about you present some paperwork that you tried, and if you failed, you automatically qualify for, a lower system of tuition assistance or something. Like, everybody out the box should not get like free college. It is what it is. Like, you can't give everything away for free. And then on top of that, what is it? Immigrants just coming to the country. Like, it's not America no more. It's come on, everybody. You can come in. You can be in. But then when you motherfuckers ain't got the fucking money to pay for the motherfuckers living in Skid Row or on the streets of every other city in the United States, it doesn't matter. Because you're here now and we got to figure out a way to raise taxes so we can pay for everybody who is currently in the country. Like, these people they're insane. They're freaking insane. Yeah, that's all it is. Let me buy your vote. And, like, you know, the black community, like, you see with this Brexit stuff, they're learning. Like, all they do, they come around when it's election time. Oh, yeah, you know, we love you. But as soon as, you know, the whole election is over, you're a super predator. Lock you up 20 years for, you know, a weed charge. But, you know, now that weed is profitable, hey, everybody, let's go ahead and let you start your business. But everybody else who currently is locked up, we're not expunging your records. You are just a victim. Like, sorry, it happened to you, but for the future, everybody else is all good because the people who are the forerunners of it, they're in jail and they're no longer qualified. You know, it's insane the way that they do this stuff. Utterly insane. And I know not everybody agrees with the marijuana thing, but I'm a Trump voter. I ain't a Republican. I think I lean more Republican because I'm an adult now, but I'm not 100%, you know, a Republican. It ain't gonna happen because for some social issues, I do agree with Democrats. Like when that Beto, aka Beta, was talking that, you know, the people inside of the prisons or, you know, victims and whatnot, is true. Like, black people were victimized by the Clintons for years. Now here we are. Now they're trying to act like this. It never happened. Like, Donald Trump put all the black people in prison, although they're like 10 years into a 20-year sentence. You know, blame Trump. Everything in America is Trump's fault. It's insane.
Welcome back, everyone, to the first Democratic presidential debate from the Arts Center in Miami.
And as we continue the questioning, time to get more members of our team in the mix.
So right now, let's turn it over to Chuck Todd and Rachel Maddow. Take it away.
Thanks, Jose. All right, we're going to start by recapping the rules. 20 candidates qualified for this first Democratic debate. We're going to hear from 10 tonight, 10 more tomorrow. The breakdown for each night was selected at random. Now, the candidates will have 60 seconds to answer, 30 seconds for a follow-up if necessary, and we will be ruthless if necessary.
Yeah, we can do that. By the way, hi, Rachel.
Hi, Chuck.
How you doing?
Good.
And we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to be talking about guns and climate here up top.
All the stuff I don't care about.
Obviously, because of the size of the field, not every person will be able to weigh in on everything, but over the course of this next hour, we will hear from everyone.
If they start to bore me to death, I'm gonna roll out.
And to begin with, we're going to go with guns. And Senator Warren, I want to start with you. We are less than 50 miles from Parkland, Florida, where 17 people were killed in a school shooting last year, and where there has been significant activism on gun violence ever since. Many of you are calling for a restoration of an assault weapons ban. But even if implemented, there will still be hundreds of millions of guns in this country. Should there be a role for the federal government?
Mics are on.
Everybody's mics are on. I think I heard that too. That's okay. I think we had a little mic issue in the back.
Control room, we've got conference.
I think we heard. Yeah,
Are they talking shit about the
All right. So the
The
question
news
is simply
anchor.
this. We're from, I apologize you guys didn't get to hear this, the first part of the question. Obviously, we're not far from Parkland, Florida. Gun activism has become a big part of high school life up there in Broward County. Many of you are calling for tighter gun restrictions. Some of you are calling for the restoration of the assault weapons ban. But even if it's put in place, there's still going to be perhaps hundreds of millions of guns still on the streets. Is there a role for the federal government in order to play in order to get these guns off the streets?
Do I need to turn the volume up on the debate?
What's happening?
We are hearing our colleagues' audio. If the control room could turn off the mics. Yeah, if the control room could turn off the mics of our previous moderators, we will.
I think it's the prior moderator.
You know, we prepared for everything.
Guess what, guys?
We did not prepare for this.
We are going to take a quick break. We're going to get this technical situation fixed. We will be right back.
Is the volume levels right on the debate audio?
2020 election. Continue to follow the latest.
Or do I have it messed up?
With the NBC News mobile app. Stay connected with breaking news, top stories, live video, and all your
they're
favorite
clowns.
NBC News
It's
shows.
MSNBC.
NBC News.
Should have known when Rachel Maddow was there, something was going to be twisted.
All right, let's take a look at the Electoral College in 2020. The place to start, obviously, is where the last election ended,
just got real
2016.
loud.
And remember, of course, by the popular vote, Hillary Clinton had almost 3 million more of those than Donald Trump. But we don't elect the president by national popular vote. We do it by the Electoral College. And there, Donald Trump had the right combination of votes in the right states, enough to win 306 electoral votes for him. So how is that map looking for 2020? Well, first of all, I think one thing you need to do, just understand how narrow that Trump path was in the Electoral College in 2016. You can start by looking at Wisconsin. Look at that margin there. Fewer than 25,000 votes separated Clinton from Trump in Wisconsin. This was a state that had not gone for a Republican in a presidential election since 1984 by a margin of fewer than 25,000 votes. Trump becomes the first in over 3 decades. He gets Wisconsin. The margin in Michigan even closer, barely 10,000 votes. Trump over Clinton. And again, that's the first time since '88 that a Republican carried Michigan. And then there was Pennsylvania here, about 44,000 votes. That's the margin for Trump over Clinton in Pennsylvania. Trump wins all 3 of those states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, by a combined total of about 75,000 votes. That's it. But that's enough to win the Electoral College. So for Democrats, if they want to reverse the result of 2016, that is the easiest and most direct path, at least on paper. You flip those states where Trump's margin was the narrowest, those states that had been voting Democratic before 2016, you flip them back, you win the Electoral College, if everything else stays the same. So that's the most direct path for Democrats, at least on paper. But hey, things can change over the course of a few years. There are other states to be keeping an eye on as well. I'll give you an example. Perfect one right here, Florida. We always talk about Florida, right? Remember Florida from back in 2000. Well, here's one. Again, Donald Trump was somewhat of a surprise on election night.
Todd, I was talking about my audio.
Decent about Florida.
Could you
Trump
hear
pulled out Florida in 2016?
the debate
29
evenly?
electoral votes right there. We obviously expect to be very competitive in 2020. If the Democrats can flip Florida, just given the size of the state, that is a massive change. The one cautionary note for Democrats, though, they had a big year in the 2018 midterms. It was not big enough to carry over to Florida. In Florida, in the 2018 midterms, a Republican won the governor's race, Republican won the Senate race, ousted a Democratic incumbent, in fact, in that Senate race.
Repeating the same.
So Florida, it's tantalizing on paper for Democrats. It's always tantalizing on paper for Democrats.
They're trying to program Democrats to go ahead and get their vote in.
There's a little bit more Republican strength there in Florida. And, of course, Arizona. This is one Democrats have been talking about now, a long-time red state that Democrats think demographically might be trending in their favor. This is a state Democrats did do well in the 2018 midterms, winning a Senate race there. Clinton got within 3 points. Democrats hope that there's some momentum there, some demographic, some political momentum, and they could flip Arizona. That could change things, too.
I've been fighting these companies my whole life.
Green coat can cause cancer. They've hidden that.
So that's where the law comes in.
If you fight for what's right, you can change the world.
All right. Where are we gonna give away for free this go around?
We have the technical difficulties fixed.
Never
right,
say
Rick?
that.
Never say never. But we will march forward here, and I will lean forward here a little bit. Senator Warren, we're going to get to the gun question here. Parkland, Florida. It's just north of here in Broward County. As you know, it has created a lot of teenage
Brought to you by
activism,
Voodoo Ranger.
on the gun issue.
Not really, but this is a really good
You to come
IPA.
out with more robust plans to deal with guns, including assault weapons ban. But even if you're able to implement that, what do you do about the hundreds of millions of guns already out there? And does the federal government have to play a role in dealing with it?
So, in this period of time that I've been running for president, I've had more than 100 town halls. I've taken more than 2,000 unfiltered questions. And the single hardest question I've gotten, I got one from a little boy and I got one from a little girl. And that is to say, when you're president, how are you going to keep us safe? That's our responsibility as adults. 7 children will die today from gun violence, children and teenagers. And they won't just die in mass shootings. They'll die on sidewalks, they'll die in playgrounds, they'll die in people's backyards. Gun violence is a national health emergency in this country, and we need to treat it like that.
Yes, the bias is real,
We can do the
Matt.
things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks. We can ban the weapons of war. But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works, where it is that we can make the differences at the margins that will keep our children safe. We need to treat this like the
Oh, I got tequila up here. I'll be right back.
You didn't address, do you think the federal government needs to go and figure out a way to get the guns that are already out there?
What I think we need to do is we need to treat it like a serious research problem, which we have not done. You know, guns in the hands of a collector who's had them for decades, who's never fired them, who takes safety seriously.
Black people are
that's
so oppressed.
very
I bought my
different
third
from
house,
guns that are sold and
3-story
turned over
house in
quickly.
Williamsburg,
We can't treat
Virginia.
this as an across-the-board problem. We have to treat it like a public health emergency. That means bring data to bear, and it means make real change in this country,
Thank you.
whether it's politically popular
Under
or
Trump.
not.
Senator Booker, you have a program.
Fight for our children.
Senator Booker, you have a federal government buyback program in your plan. How is that going to work?
Well, first of all, I want to say my colleague and I both have been hearing this on the campaign trail. But what's even worse is I hear gunshots in my neighborhood. I think I'm the only one, I hope I'm the only one on this panel here that had 7 people shot in their neighborhood just last week. Someone I knew, Shahad Smith, was killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block last year. For millions of Americans, this is not a policy issue. This is an urgency. And for those who have not been directly affected, they're tired of living in a country
Black people
where
live
their kids
that
go
way
to
every
school to learn
day,
about reading,
but y'all worry about
writing, and
immigrants.
arithmetic, and how to deal with an active shooter in their school. This is something that I'm tired of, and I'm tired of hearing people, all they have to offer is thoughts and prayers.
How I
In
grew
my
up.
faith, people say faith without works is dead. So we will find a way. But the reason we have a problem right now is we've let the corporate gun lobby frame this debate. It is time that we have bold actions and a bold agenda. I will get that done as President of the United States because this is not about policy, this is personal.
Thank you, Senator Booker.
Secretary Castro, I'd like to talk to you about something that Senator Booker just mentioned there, the idea of active shooter drills in schools. As school shootings seem like an almost every day or every week occurrence now, they don't make a complete news cycle anymore, no matter the death toll. As parents are so afraid as their kids go off to school that their kids will be caught up in something like this, next to nothing has changed in federal law that might affect the prevalence of school shootings. Is this a problem that is going to continue to get worse over our lifetimes, or is there something that you would do as president that you really think would turn it around?
Yeah, Rachel, I'm the dad of a 10-year-old girl, Karina, who's here tonight. And the worst thing is knowing that your child might be worried about what could happen at school, a place that's supposed to be safe. The answer to your question is no, we don't have to accept that. And I believe that on January 20th, 2021, at 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate.
Oh, that's what you believe?
The activists of Parkland, folks from Moms Demand, who have risen up across the United States and inspired so many people. You know, we may not have seen yet legislative action, but we're getting closer. The House took a vote. In the Senate, the question often is if the decision is between 60 votes, a filibuster, or passing common sense gun reform, I'm going to choose common sense gun reform. So I believe that we're going to be able to get that done in 2021.
Secretary Castro, thank you.
Rachel, I have something to add to this briefly.
We'll give you 30 seconds for follow-up on that question, on that answer from Secretary Castro. Congressman Ryan.
You're talking about in the schools. These kids are traumatized. I support all the gun reforms here. We need to start dealing with the trauma that our kids have. We need trauma-based care in every school. We need social and emotional learning in every school. 90% of the shooters who do school shootings come from the school they're in, and 73% of them feel shamed, traumatized, or bullied. We need to make sure that these kids feel connected to the school. That means a mental health counselor in every single school in the United States. We need to start playing offense. If our kids are so traumatized that they're getting a gun and going into our schools, we're doing something wrong too, and we need reform around trauma-based care.
Congressman O'Rourke, you're a Texan who's you campaigned all over the state in 2018 in the most conservative parts there. What do you tell a gun owner who may agree with you on everything else? Okay, but says, you know what, the Democrats, if I vote for them in there, they're going to take my gun away. And even though I agree with you on all these other issues, how do you have that conversation?
Here's how we had that conversation in Texas. I shared with them what I learned from those students who survived the Santa Fe High School shooting. A young student named Bree, her friend Marcel, who survived another shooting, the mother of a victim who lost her life, Rhonda Hart. They talked about universal background checks where you close every loophole. We know that they save lives. Talked about ending the sales of assault weapons into our communities. Those weapons of war were designed to kill people as effectively
here we go.
and as efficiently
Weapons
as
of
possible.
war.
They should belong on the battlefield and not in our communities. Red flag laws so that if someone poses a danger to themselves or to someone else, they're stopped before it's too late. And what I found in each one of those 254 counties is that Democrats and independents and Republicans, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, agreed. But this effort must be led by the young people that you referenced at the beginning of this issue. Those students from Marjory Stoneman Douglas led the charge here in Florida, and they've been able to change those laws. They're making our democracy work, ensuring that our values and our interests and our priorities are reflected in the laws that we pass.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke. Hang on. Let me give 30 seconds. Senator Klobuchar, the Iron Range, I'm curious. Gun confiscation, right? If the government is buying back, how do you not have that conversation?
Well, that's not confiscation. You would give them the offer to buy back their gun. But I'll say this. I look at these proposals and I say, does this hurt my Uncle Dick and his deer stand, coming from a proud hunting and fishing state? These proposals don't do that. When I was a prosecutor, I supported the assault weapon ban. When I was in the Senate, I saw those moms from Sandy Hook come and try to advocate for change, and we all failed. And then now these Parkland kids from Florida, they started literally a national shift. You know why? It's just like with gay marriage. When kids talk to their parents and their grandparents, they say, I don't understand why we can't put these sensible things in place. They listen. And if we get bested by a bunch of 17-year-olds, it's the best thing that ever happened. We need to get
Senator Booker, let me go to you on another matter, actually. Senator Mitch McConnell says that his most consequential achievement as Senate Majority Leader was preventing President Obama from filling a Supreme Court seat. Having served with Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, do you believe they would confirm your court nominees?
I'm going to use 20 of my seconds just to say there's one thing we don't all agree with when it comes to guns, and I think it's common sense, and over 70% of Americans agree with me. If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm. And not everybody in this field agrees with that, but in states like Connecticut that did that, they saw 40% drops in gun violence and 15% drops in suicides. We need to start having bold agendas on guns. When it comes to the Supreme Court, very clearly, I agree with my friend, Secretary Castro, we are going to get to 50 votes in the Senate. This is a team sport.
No, you're not.
Whoever is our nominee needs to campaign in places like South Carolina, because we can elect Jamie Harrison. They need to campaign in places like Iowa, because we can win a Senate seat there. This is about getting us back to having 50 votes in the Senate and more, so that we can not only balance the Supreme Court, but start to pass an aggressive agenda that, frankly, isn't so aggressive because most of America agrees with the policy objectives of our party.
Mayor de Blasio, I want to jump in on this for a follow-up. Mayor de Blasio, you're using
we have to actually...
Congressman Delaney, you'll have some time in a moment on this issue. Congressman Delaney, I'll give you some time in a moment.
Nobody wants to hear you, Delaney. I don't know who you are.
You are used to saying what you want to have happen and having it happen. If you nominate a Supreme Court nominee as President of the United States and Mitch McConnell is still Senate Majority Leader, what makes you believe that he would allow you to make a nominee?
Rachel, I am chief executive of the nation's largest city, and I also want to just say something quick on the gun issue and come to your question. Look, I run the largest police force in America, too, and if we're going to stop these shootings, we're going to get these guns off the street, we have to have a very different relationship between our police and our community. I also want to say there's something that sets me apart from all my colleagues running in this race, and that is for the last 21 years, I've been raising a black son in America. And I have
that doesn't make you special.
Very, very serious talks with my son Dante about how to protect himself on the streets of our city and all over this country, including how to deal with the fact that he has to take special caution because there have been too many tragedies between our young men and our police, too, as we saw recently in Indiana. So we need to have a different conversation in this country about guns, but also a different conversation about policing that brings police and community together. We've done that in New York City, and we've driven down crime.
No, you have not.
But to your question about Mitch McConnell, there's a political solution that we have to come to grips with. If the Democratic Party would stop acting like the party of the elites and be the party of working people again and go into states, including red states, to convince people we're on their side, we can put pressure on their senators to actually have to vote for the nominees that are put forward. Decent jurists deserve that right.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
Senator Warren, I'm going to get you. I will get you 30 seconds. I promise. Let me get this question. We're trying. I know you guys. We got other issues we're trying to get to, including a big one coming up in a minute. But Senator Warren, I want to continue on the Mitch McConnell thing because you have a lot of ambitious plans. You have a plan for that. Okay. We talked about the Supreme Court. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell if you don't beat him in the Senate? If he's still sitting there as the Senate Majority Leader, it's very plausible you be elected president with a Republican Senate. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do. We are a democracy, and the way a democracy is supposed to work is the will of the people matters. Now, we for far too long have had a Congress in Washington that has just completely dismissed what people care about across this country. They have made this country work much better for those who can make giant contributions, made it work better for those who hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers, and not made it work for the people. Well, here's how I see this happening. Number one, sure, I want to see us get a Democratic majority in the Senate. But short of a Democratic majority in the Senate, you better understand, the fight still goes on. It starts in the White House, and it means that everybody we energize in 2020 stays on the front lines come January 2021. We have to push from the outside, have leadership from the inside, and make this Congress reflect the will of the people.
I'm going to get a couple of you in here. I'm going to get you a couple in here. 30 seconds. Congressman Delaney, you seem to believe you can do everything in a bipartisan manner. Mitch McConnell doesn't operate that way. He operates differently. Why do you think he is going to conform to your style?
Exactly. I think we need to get things done. That's why I believe we need to operate in a bipartisan manner. Listen, I'll sign into law bills that come to the White House that are passed on a party line basis, absolutely. But all the big transformative things we've ever done in this country's history have happened when huge majorities of the American people get behind them, which is why we need real solutions, not impossible promises. We need to put forth ideas that work, whether it's on health care, creating universal health care so that every American gets health care, but not running on making private insurance illegal. The gun issue is related. The gun safety issue is related because I can't tell you how many times I've been with folks in Western Maryland, and they've said to me, You know, Democrats don't do anything for us. Republicans don't do anything for us. You fight all the time, so they vote on that single issue.
Okay,
if we become the party of getting things done for the American people with real solutions, not impossible promises, we'll be able to get all these
I promise
things
2:30's here. I'm going to say, Senator Booker, 30 seconds. How do you deal with Mitch McConnell? You've been in the Senate. You can't get bills on the floor right now with Mitch McConnell. Presidents can't do it. Is President Booker going to get his bills on the floor with Senator McConnell?
You know, when I got to the United States Senate, going back to what de Blasio said, as an African-American man in an African-American dominated community, I knew one of the biggest issues was criminal justice reform. From police accountability to dealing with the fact that we have a nation that has more African-Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850. And when I got to the Senate, people told me we could not get a comprehensive criminal justice reform bill done. And as my colleagues in the Senate know, I fought on that bill from the day I got to the Senate, built coalitions across the aisle, and today we passed the First Step Act. It's not as far as I want to go, but thousands of people will be liberated. I've taken on tough problems people said we cannot achieve, and I've been able to get things accomplished.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Rachel's got the next question.
Governor,
next,
you're going to be happy with where we go. Governor Inslee, this next question is to you. You got me? Rachel. You got me? You have staked your candidacy on the issue of climate change. It is first, second, and third priority for you. You said it's all the issues. Let's get specific. We're here in Miami, which is already experiencing serious flooding on sunny days as a result of sea level rise. Parts of Miami Beach and the Keys could be underwater in our lifetimes. Does your plan save Miami?
Yes, first by taking away the filibuster from Mitch McConnell to start with. We have to do that. Look at. We are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change, and we are the last that can do something about it. Our towns are burning, our fields are flooding, Miami is inundated. And we have to understand, this is a climate crisis, an emergency, and it is our last chance in the administration, next one, to do something about it. And we need to do what I've done in my state. We've passed a 100% clean electrical grid bill. We now have a vision statement, and my plan has been called the gold standard of putting people to work. But the most important thing on this, and the biggest decision for the American public, is who's going to make this the first priority. And I am the candidate and the only one who's saying this has to be the top priority of the United States, the organizing principle to mobilize the United States so that we can do what we've always done, lead the world and invent the future and put 8 million people to work.
Governor Inslee,
that's what we're going to do.
Congressman O'Rourke, you've also put out a big climate change plan from your campaign. You want some big changes in a pretty short period of time, including switching to renewable energy, pushing to replace gas-powered cars in favor of electric ones. What's your message to a voter who supports the
they are very
goal
boring,
of what
I'll
you're
be
trying
honest.
to do, but suddenly feels as if government's telling them how to
I'm ready
live
for Trump
and
to go
ordering
against
them
them
how to
already.
live? What is that balance
It'd be
like?
entertaining.
I think you've got to bring everybody in to the decisions and the solutions to the challenges that we face. That's why we're traveling everywhere, listening to everyone. We were in Pacific Junction, a town that had never meaningfully flooded before, just up against the Missouri River in Iowa. And every home in that community had flooded. There were farms just outside of Pacific Junction that were effectively lakes. Those farmers already underwater in debt. Their markets closed to them by a trade war under this administration, and now they don't know what to do. We, in our administration, are going to fund resiliency in those communities, in Miami, in Houston, Texas, those places that are on the front lines of climate change today. We're going to mobilize $5 trillion in this economy over the next 10 years. We're going to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, and we're going to put farmers and ranchers in the driver's seat, renewable and sustainable agriculture to make sure that we capture more carbon out of the air and keep more of it in the soil, paying farmers for the environmental services that they want to provide. If all of us does all that we can, then we're going to be able to keep this planet from warming another 2 degrees Celsius and ensure that we match what this country can do and live up to our promise and our potential.
30 seconds, Secretary Castro. Who pays for the mitigation to climate, whether it's building seawalls, for people that are perhaps living in places that they shouldn't be living? Is this a federal government issue that needs to do that? Do they have to move these people? What do you do about that where maybe their they're building a house someplace that isn't safe, who pays to build that house? And how much should the government be bailing them out?
Well, I don't think that that represents the vast majority of the issue. In fact, you know, my first visit after I announced my candidacy wasn't to Iowa or New Hampshire, it was to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Because people should know that if I'm elected president, everybody will count. And, you know, I'm one of the few candidates in this race with executive experience, with a track record of getting things done. When I was mayor of San Antonio, we moved our local public utility. We began to shift it from coal-fired plants to solar and other renewables, and also created more than 800 jobs doing that. And when I was HUD secretary, we worked on the National Disaster Resilience Competition to invest in communities that were trying to rebuild from natural disasters in a sustainable way. That's the way that we're going to help make sure that we're all safer in the years to come and that we combat climate change. And if I'm elected president, the first thing that I would do, like Senator Klobuchar also has said, is sign an executive order recommitting us to the Paris Climate Accord so that we lead again.
Congressman Ryan, I got a full question for you here, which is simply this. There are a lot of the climate plans include pricing carbon, taxing carbon in some way. This type of proposal has been tried in a few places, whether it's Washington State, where voters voted it down. You've had the Yellow Vest movement. We had in Australia one party get rejected out of fear of the cost of climate change sort of being put on the backs of the consumer. If pricing carbon is just politically impossible, how do we pay for climate mitigation?
Well, there's a variety of different ways to pay. We talk about different ways of raising revenue, and I think we've got to build our way out of this and grow our way out of it. But let me just talk real quick to the previous question about real politics. We could talk about climate, we could talk about guns, we could talk about all of these issues that we all care about. We have a perception problem with the Democratic Party. We are not connecting to the working class people in the very states that I represent, in Ohio, in the industrial Midwest. We've lost all connection. That we have got to change the center of gravity of the Democratic Party from being coastal and elitist and Ivy League, which is the perception, to somebody from the forgotten communities that have been left behind for the last 30 years, to get those workers back on our side so we can say we're going to build electric vehicles, we're going to build solar panels. But if you want to beat Mitch McConnell, this better be a working class party if you want to go into Kentucky and take his rear end out. And if you want to take Lindsey Graham out, you got to have a blue collar party that can go into the textile communities in South Carolina. So all I'm saying here,
thank you, Congressman Ryan.
All I'm saying here
thank you, Congressman Ryan.
So Chuck, all I'm saying is here, if we don't address that fundamental problem with our connection to workers, white, black, brown, gay, straight, working class people, none of this is going to get done, Chuck.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep moving. Congressman Delaney, I'm going to get to you.
I introduced the only bipartisan carbon tax bill in Congress.
All right. 30 seconds, go.
All the economists agree that a carbon pricing mechanism works. You just have to do it right. You can't put a price on carbon, raise energy prices, and not give the money back to the American people. My proposal, which is put a price on carbon, give a dividend back to the American people. It goes out one pocket, back in the other.
Thank you, Congressman.
I can get that passed my first year as president with a coalition of every Democrat in the Congress and the Republicans who live in coastal states. Because Republicans in Florida, they actually care about this issue. This has got to be our way forward if we're actually serious about this issue.
You're mad. Just like talking and talking.
One of the first things you did after launching your campaign was to issue an apology to the LGBTQ community about your past stances and statements on gay rights. After the Trump administration's rollbacks of civil rights protections for many in that community, why should voters in that community, or voters that care about this issue in general, trust you now?
Well, let me say that there is no one in our government at any level who has the right to tell any American who they should be allowed to love or who they should be allowed to marry.
More buzzwords.
Over 6 years shows my commitment to fighting for LGBTQ equality. I serve on the Equality Caucus and recently voted for passage of the Equality Act. Maybe many people in this country can relate to the fact that I grew up in a socially conservative home, held views when I was very young that I no longer hold today. I've served with LGBTQ service members, both in training and deployed downrange. I know that they would give their life for me, and I would give my life for them. It is this commitment that I'll carry through as President of the United States, recognizing that there are still people who are facing discrimination in the workplace, still people who are unable to find a home for their families. It is this kind of discrimination that we need to address.
But it's not enough. It's not enough. If I can add to this, it's very important.
30
because
seconds,
this is not
Senator.
enough. Look, civil rights is some place to begin, but in the African American civil rights community, another place to focus on was to stop the lynching of African Americans. We do not talk enough about trans Americans, especially African American trans Americans, and the incredibly high rates of murder right now. We don't talk enough about how many children, about 30% of LGBTQ kids, who do not go to school because of fear. It's not enough just to be on the Equality Act. I'm an original co-sponsor. We need to have a president that will fight to protect LGBTQ Americans every single day from violence.
Thank you, Senator
Senator Klobuchar, let me put this to you. On the issue of civil rights, for decades, on the issue of civil rights and demographics, honestly, and politics, for decades, the Democratic Party has counted on African American voter turnout as step one
Here we go.
to winning elections on a national level. Democrats are counting on the
Call 'em
Latino
out.
community now and in the future in the same way.
Call 'em out.
What have you done?
Not a
for Black and
goddamn
Latino
thing.
voters that
Fuck
should
that
enthuse
motherfucker.
them about going to the polls for you if you're your party's nominee?
My life and my career
switched it
and
to
my
her.
work in the Senate has been about
He ain't did
economic
shit.
opportunity. And to me, this means better child care for everyone in this country. And when you want to have an economy that works, you need to have retirement that works. You need to have public schools that work. And you also need to make sure that those communities are able to get those jobs of the future, the STEM jobs. In fact, Donald Trump, one of the first bills that he signed, of the 34 he signed where I was the lead Democrat, okay, that's a first up here, was one that was about that, making sure minority community members could share in those jobs. So to me,
So
this
Donald
is
Trump
about a few
did something
things.
to
It's
help
about
the
an
African American
woman that goes to a
community.
hospital in New Orleans, says her hips are
You
swollen,
dumb bitch.
and then doctor ignores her.
But he's a
Everybody
racist,
dies.
right?
It's about the fact that African American women make 61 cents for every dollar a white man makes. So in short, we need to, one, and I will do this in my first 100 days as president, we will work to make sure everyone can vote at this table. Everyone can vote in this country. And we will also go to the next step of criminal justice reform. Senator Booker and I worked on that First Step Act, but we should go to the Second Step Act, which is to help all our communities across.
Senator, thank you very much. 30-second follow-up to you. Secretary Castro, this is a 70% Latino city here in Miami. You are the only Latino Democrat who is running this year in the presidential race. Is that enough?
Identity
Senator
politics.
Klobuchar is describing there an economic justice agenda. Is that enough to mobilize Latino voters to stand with the Democratic Party in a big way?
Well, I also think that we have to recognize racial and social justice. And, you know, I was in Charleston not too long ago, and I remembered that Dylan Roof went to the Mother Emanuel AME Church, and he murdered 9 people who were worshiping, and then he was apprehended by police without incident. Well, but what about Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and Laquan McDonald and Sandra Bland and Pamela Turner and Antonio Arce? I'm proud that I'm the only candidate so far that has put forward legislation that would reform our policing system in America and make sure that no matter what the color of your skin is, that you're treated the same, including Latinos who were mistreated too oftentimes by police.
Secretary Castro, thank you.
Let me go over to Lester Holt, who's got a question, I believe, a viewer question.
I'm over here, Chuck.
Where are you
Thanks.
here? All
We
right.
ask voters from across the country to submit their
Damn, it's time for a
questions to the
fucking
candidates.
break.
Let me read one now.
Motherfucker.
This comes from John in New York, who submitted this question. He asks, does the United States have a responsibility to protect in the case of genocide or crimes against humanity? Do we have a responsibility to intervene, to protect people threatened by their governments, even when atrocities do not affect American core interests? I'd like to direct that question to Congressman O'Rourke.
John, I appreciate the question. The answer is yes, but that action should always be undertaken with allies and partners and friends. When the United States presents a united front, we have a much better chance of achieving our foreign policy aims and preventing the kind of genocide to which you refer, the kind of genocide that we saw